basically means government by the people, of the people, for the people. But the people are retarded.
Always a funny video.
It's a bold take.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a bold take, but it is not founded on weak ground.
No, there's definitely some merit in that.
Into.
Definitely some merit.
Welcome back to the Arbiters Seeking podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about quite a different topic than normal, but that is exactly what we seek to do, and I don't want to niche out or anything like that. Let curiosity lead here.
So, out of curiosity, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about the Federalist Papers. Here it is right here. This is the old one from the UTK library. I think this was printed in 2008, but when I opened it, there were still pages that were like stuck together because no one's opened this book ever.
Wow.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know what the Federalist Papers are or how
I don't know what they
whatsoever.
are. I have no idea what the Federalist Papers are.
Do you know from history lessons what who the Federalists are and Anti-Federalists?
It was a group during the Revolutionary War, but that's all I know. Or is that even true?
A little different.
Okay, then
So,
I don't know.
To quickly summarize kind of what they are, the Federalist Papers were the group Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, and James Madison, who wrote the Constitution, and they advocated for a strong central government and not a democracy. They advocated for a republic. So let me ask you, what kind of government do you believe we have?
Isn't it considered a democratic republic?
Yes, but it was intended to be a little different than it is nowadays. And in this video, we're not going to get into what it's devolved into, but I'm going to get into what it was meant to be, what the roots are, what the basis of the American government system is.
Gotcha.
So, the overarching philosophy of the Federalist Papers, which is very philosophical and has a lot of roots in religion, philosophy, some of the greatest minds of political theory and argumentative philosophy that came together, and they looked into history. They found examples of different governments, how they worked, what didn't work, and essentially found a very central theme that was either monarchy or democracy were the choices that were presented to the people, and they decided, well, neither of those have ever worked in history, so what are we going to do about that? So initially, after the Revolutionary War ended, the Articles of Confederation came out. That was the first Constitution of the United States, written by Thomas Jefferson. We all know him. And so that government that was created was very weak, and it lacked a strong central government. It was more democratic than the Federalist Papers advocated for. And so when it failed, there was a constitutional convention to update it. They wanted to update it initially, but then the Federalists came together and said, no, we got to start from scratch.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that really is what stirred the pot, because everybody had just gotten out of the monarchy that they were under in Britain, right? And so anything resembling a monarchy or a strong central power really put people off and scared them away, and they didn't really accept opinions that even closely resembled it, which is why the Federalist Papers were written to advocate for the Constitution that they created, which was advocating for a stronger central government.
Wouldn't that be kind of the same thing as a monarchy, though? Strong central government?
No. And this is why. So we're going through, in this one, Federalist Papers 1 through 38 or so. I am only about halfway through. But a common thread within almost all the papers is checks and balances and separation of power.
Right.
These checks and balances were created to mimic nature itself.
Okay.
And so I think I came up with I thought of it and thought of kind of a way to explain this. Imagine the world. If there were too many predators in the world, we're talking like wolves and bears, then there'd be not enough prey in the world, and that would throw the world out of balance. Fauna, like grasses, would end up overrunning the world and then end up killing the prey, etc., etc. The world's in perfect balance, and they check each other.
Right.
So the government was set up in a way where no branch of government could have power over any other, and the only way to actually move government to create something or to make moves in the nation was for everybody to be united against that one idea.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that creates is that gets away from any one person or any faction of people tyrannizing another group, because that was a problem with democracy.
Right.
So you have monarchy, which is one person ruling everybody who could easily fall to tyrannic rule.
Mm-hmm.
Or you have democracy, which is everybody ruling themselves, which would, as they assert, produce a mobocracy, that's what they would call, which is just a group tyrannizing the minorities of people. So the government was set up, in a way, not to benefit anybody except for the whole. It was set up so that the minority would get as much representation as the majority, and that rash moves could not be made by the government to tyrannize people.
That makes sense.
So people think of it as slow. We can't get laws passed. We can't get things done. It was designed that way.
Right.
Because if we move too fast, then the minorities will get oppressed.
Mm-hmm.
That's the point.
I mean, just those in charge could get anything they wanted in a very short period of time as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of does make sense.
Yeah. And so the people on the other side, the anti-federalists, there's also the anti-federalist papers, which weren't as vast, but I'm sure I might get into talking about that in another video. But they advocated for something resembling the Articles of Confederation, but make it work a little better.
Okay.
This is my summation right now, which was a democracy, for the people, by etc. But they'd already seen that it didn't work, and the Constitution ended up being ratified by the majority of the states. Even though in New York, where the Federalist Papers were written and they were strongly advocating for it, they didn't end up agreeing with it.
Really?
Yeah. The actual people that they wrote it to didn't end up voting for it in the whole. Yeah. And I mean, there's these were written very swiftly and in a very short amount of time. It's been said that they wrote probably over 1,000 words of like finished text a day to complete these papers.
Wow.
Between the three of them. Not spread out, each person writing 1,000 words. This is 180,000 words in whole. And this is
all the Federalist Papers. Book.
This whole book is not the Federalist Papers. There's a couple things. There's a Constitution. There's some of the anti-Federalist Papers in here, but
yeah,
it's 180,000 words, so it's not short.
So how many Federalist Papers are there?
I believe there's 83, 84, something around that range.
And in each one of those papers is describing the checks and balances system in our government? Or basically just the outline of how our government is supposed to run?
The outline.
Okay.
And so what they're doing is they are essentially writing to the people of New York, who they want them to adopt the Constitution, which is much shorter in length than the papers ended up being. The papers were simply all the thoughts that went into it. You know, what in the past examples of government, what has worked, what has failed, what are we advocating for now? They considered kind of what the ramifications would be if it was not adopted, as far as like foreign people attacking, not being able to tax people, which tax is a very good and integral thing to us, but they wanted tax to be limited to the essentials. What are the essentials? The Constitution, the Articles of Confederation. What are we actually protecting? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And these things aren't guaranteed to you, they're not given to you, but the government's purpose is to simply protect those rights.
Right.
And so, essentially, I don't know, for me, it was very intriguing to read because growing up, I was not interested in history whatsoever.
Yeah.
It is one of my weakest desires as far as like learning something.
It's a tough one.
But actually reading it, I quickly shifted my ignorance into a hate towards modern day instead. Because, I don't know, I had these ideas that old things in history were archaic and that we're a lot smarter now. But the only reason that I thought that is because I hadn't actually looked into it, but then actually reading even half of this, it's like, we're a lot stupider now. It's like not even comparable. The vocabulary used is almost unintelligible.
Due to our lack of vocabulary now?
Yes.
Yeah.
And lack of just specificity and complexity of ideas. I mean, what decision by government has been made in our lifetime that actually took into account these many things?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you.
They don't advocate for. We're not looking at the historical ramifications of things at all. And this goes into my everyday life. I'm not looking at, with my negligence to adopt history as something that's interesting, I'm neglecting all the advantages I could get from learning from other people's mistakes. I think I'll even find a quote that was in the Federalist Papers that John Jay wrote, I believe. Let me find it real quick. Here it is. John Jay says, "We may profit by their experience without paying the price which it cost them." And this is what he cites as the reason why he's bringing up all the historical lessons that they end up teaching throughout the papers as an advocation for the Constitution.
It's a really powerful quote. We don't have to make the same mistakes.
And I'll make my really big point here. The biggest thing, it's a part of checks and balances, but it is understanding human morality and actually settling that as something that we need to be able to check. So how do we represent a government? How do we represent the best of people in a government where, or in a world where people want power and are not always moral?
I mean, you got to promote and delegate to humble and moral people.
But even they are not moral
Right.
sometimes.
Yes.
So the whole underpinning philosophy of the government, as I've said, is that only the good can go out because the majority of people believe in that common good. And that's the only thing that ends up being moved within the government. But you have to realize that people no matter who they are, no matter how moral they are, that they will make the wrong choices at a certain time.
Right.
And that goes into this excellent quote, which is skipping ahead, but it's in Federalist 51. I have it marked here. If men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary. In framing a government which is to be administered by men over men, the greatest difficulty lies in this. You must first enable government to control the governed, and in the next place, oblige it to control itself.
Interesting. So basically, we have to submit to the fact that other fallible humans are going to be governing over us.
Mm-hmm.
But the very last part of that quote, that they have to govern themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So the government has to govern the government.
Yeah, that's the checks and balances.
Yeah.
That's the different branches saying, no, we're not going to
So
do that.
So essentially the way it's been mapped out, we're recognizing that no man is omniscient.
Mm-hmm.
No one's infallible.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of creating a ladder of, well, who gets to say X, Y, Z, it's kind of a interwoven. One can't exist without the other. One can't do another thing that would contradict the other.
Mm-hmm.
It's very genius, actually.
It is genius. And yet we write it off as a...
Oh, it's just old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just old, so it doesn't work anymore.
I don't even think we could probably come up with that today if we had to revise the government.
No, because there's too much interest involved.
Yeah.
And again, yeah, I don't want to get into in this episode what
Right.
is happening right now, but let's just say they have found the loopholes that the Anti-Pharaohs actually anticipated.
Which were?
That, well, I mean, the loopholes that are super observable now are just simply the businesses that are controlling
Yes.
the people
What
in the
exactly?
government.
What exactly were the Anti-Federalists for?
A stronger democracy, and but not a strong central government. More government of the states.
Okay.
Each state is like its own thing,
Yeah.
right? But as they cite in the Federalist Papers many times, and I'm sure I'll strengthen my position on the other side as well when I cover the Anti-Federalist Papers. But the biggest consideration was if the states are their own, what is to say that they will not end up feuding with each other?
Oh, it
Like
would be
all the European nations have ever done.
within 10 years that would have happened.
Exactly.
That
was why
there would
they
probably
had to be united.
There'd probably be about 4 states right now
Mm-hmm.
if all 50 were allowed with their own devices. Because we would have just, certain states would have just conquered other states and
It
added
would have
on.
become Europe.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. And then who is to defend all these separate states from an even bigger power from Europe? We all needed to be united so that we could have a national army, national tax, so that we're able to actually have that army and protect our life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness.
Right. It's like the Pink Floyd quote. I can't even remember the end of the song, but it's, united we stand, divided we fall.
Mm-hmm.
It's off the wall. Yeah.
But the thing is, all this, the bigger the government gets, the better it functions. The more diverse the ideas, the less likely that one pervasive idea is one bad pervasive idea is going to end up saturating what becomes law.
Bigger in what sense?
The more people that it governs, the more people that it governs, the more that the only good ideas are going to come through.
Because, why?
Because there's more people to say no, and there's more people to say
I see.
yes.
Okay. So, in theory, then, the majority will always get what they want because they're voting on the topic, the discussion of whatever it is.
Yeah.
Okay. I can't see that being the case, though, in today's world.
No.
Simply because of it's all about picking teams.
Mm-hmm.
It's never really the majority. It's just slightly over a half.
Yeah, 51%.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably something they didn't anticipate.
No. And they didn't anticipate the breakdown of what the branches' roles are too. We don't have the perfectly balanced checks and balances that were actually designed. And that's something I haven't really looked into very much, so I'll be honest, I can't speak on it a lot.
I was just going to say, is that because it has been changed?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. And so now one party can eventually get a lot more power over another party than ever was intended.
Okay. So what is in the Federalist Papers is not actually exactly what we do now?
No.
Okay. Interesting.
The amendments were not in the Federalist Papers. They
Right.
didn't want the amendments.
Mm-hmm.
Because people think that I've heard it said that it is vague, that the Constitution is vague, and it leaves a lot of interpretation. It was never meant to be a complete source of all your information. It's a structure of government. And all these laws all the amendments that were added, all those they intended, the founders, the Federalists wanted those things to be under the state's control to determine the little nitpicky laws and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But Thomas Jefferson, an anti-federalist,
Really?
wanted the Bill of Rights.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting.
We're not... And the reason why we showed the video at the beginning is to display that there is actual consideration that needs to be had about our moral capability of doing good, always. That's what's in question here. Are we capable of electing a ruler or being free ourselves to be able to govern ourselves?
No.
I don't think that that's, especially with our Christian background, I don't think that's a good idea at all. And as we move towards a more democratic government, we're seeing the breakdown of everything. And if the Constitution falls, there'll be a civil war.
Wow. You think that's something that could happen?
Well, the Constitution is fighting for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Mm-hmm.
If the Constitution goes away, that also goes away.
Right.
And so if a government tries to tell me this is what we're moving towards, and I won't go into much detail, but they want, free college, they want guaranteed housing, they want things like that. Those things aren't possible without someone giving more than they ought to and taking away their liberty to say no.
Mm-hmm.
Why should I have to pay for this person to do this, right?
Right.
Why should I pay for someone else's house? We should be free to prosper on our own, not guaranteed prosperous positions.
Right.
That's a problem that's happening today. People want more than they actually give.
Yep.
We're turning into consumers in every possible facet of life.
Dangerous.
It's very dangerous. We need to have some accountability.
Yeah. But accountability in a society where everyone is trying to outdo somebody and everything is about competition, it's hard to hold people accountable when there is no real standard.
Mm-hmm. Thought about it a lot, that the standards by which we live are much different, because I don't think it's obvious that we probably won't have any more large-scale wars anymore after nuclear weapons were invented.
You don't think so?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Unless it was a civil war, then we could see wars like
Right.
that, because a nation's not going to blow up itself. At least I guess. You know, who knows what happens.
Hopefully.
But anyways, I think, and I think you also agree, that right now we're in a war of the mind.
Yeah.
We're not being killed, we're being manipulated into being blobless, lifeless, opinionless,
Demoralized.
spineless, demoralized human beings who are at the will of the higher people. That is the entire reason the Constitution was created, to get away from the monarchy. And yet we're giving it all up because I want to go to school for free. I don't want to work. I want all the stuff given to me, and I don't want to actually put out anything that is required to get those things rightfully. And it is so respectable that these people back in the 1780s were able to think of all these things and determine that the world would end up falling into that. And they created a way to fix it. And we're slowly but surely ignoring the advice of history as far as it goes for our government. Well, in every case.
Especially, you're an outlier here. I probably will never read the Federalist Papers. I'm sure many people our age don't even know that they exist.
I didn't know they existed until
Yeah, exactly.
recently.
So this is the importance of educating ourselves. Because right now I'm sure most people are under the impression that this is the smartest we've ever been in history, and that everyone, even 100 years ago, was half as intelligent as we are, which I'm sure in many cases it's vice versa.
I will say, in history, we have a higher minimum level of education, I would say. Like, we don't have people in today's society that can't read unless they tried very hard not to learn. But the people that were educated back in the day stinking loved education. So one of my favorite stories in history that I learned in elementary school or something like that was hearing about Abraham Lincoln. He was obsessed with reading. He loved books, and he would, I forgot how many miles he'd walk, but it was insane distances to walk to a library just so he could read and access information.
It's awesome.
All we want to do today is just scroll on Instagram and not learn anything and have opinions or articulate them or actually have a deep thought. Scary.
And without education or the love of it, it's how we end up seeing history repeat itself.
Oh, absolutely. We're falling again.
Yeah.
And we don't have much choice than to either go back to our roots or all die trying.
It's all a cycle, right?
Yes.
Weak men create hard times create strong men create easy times.
Excellent.
Repeats. Well, I am now intrigued by the Federalist Papers, and I'll probably have to do some of my own research on this topic. But that's about all the time we have today on the Arbiters Seeking podcast.
Yes, sir.
We appreciate you guys for watching and helping us gain insight on topics and thinking outside the norm.
Yes, sir.